It is 6 p.m. here in Cairo. Time for the news bulletin, and we will be starting straight away with the main headlines. Addressing the nation marking the 43rd anniversary of the Sinai Liberation Day, President Fattah al-Sisi said that Sinai is part and parcel of Egypt and is engraved in the hearts of the Egyptians. The head of state added that the peninsula will remain protected with the will of its people, the courage of its army, and the determination of its sons. The president expressed appreciation for the brave army and the police forces, the armed forces, as well as the Egyptian diplomacy experts for their diligence in the battle to liberate Sinai and to uproot terrorism. President Fattah al-Sisi highlighted that maintaining the Egyptian national security is not for compromise. The head of state also hailed the Egyptian people who proved their deep awareness of the amount of challenges facing their country and the region by forming a strong and cohesive internal front. President al-Sisi, meanwhile, said that a fair and comprehensive peace in the Middle East will not be established but through the establishment of an independent Palestinian state in line with the international laws. He noted that Egypt will remain a strong shield against any attempts to liquidate the Palestinian cause. The president emphasized that launching the reconstruction in Gaza should be implemented in accordance with the Arab Islamic endorsed plan without relocating Palestinians, stressing the absolute rejection of any displacement of Palestinians from the land. The head of state clarified that since the early moments of the Gaza war, Egypt called for a ceasefire, a release of all the captives, and allowing the needed humanitarian aid into the Palestinian territory. Posting a greeting to the Egyptians on the Sinai Liberation Day on his social media account, President Fattah al-Sisi renewed the pledge to keep building the nation and protecting the homeland for which the armed forces heroes shed their blood. President al-Sisi extended thanks to the Egyptians' unity and awareness of challenges, adding that this will ensure that the nation is always preserved. He concluded by saying, "Long live Egypt." Egypt's First Lady, Mrs. Intisar al-Sisi, greeted the Egyptian people marking the 43rd anniversary of the Sinai Liberation. On a social media account, the First Lady said that the day is a perfect opportunity to revive the heroic acts of honest men and to remember the sacrifices of the great Egyptian people. She wished good returns of the occasion and that Sinai remains free, with the nation a top priority. On behalf of President Fattah al-Sisi, Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli arrived in Uganda to preside over the Egyptian delegation in the extraordinary summit of the countries contributing peacekeepers in the African Union's missions in Somalia. The summit is hosted in the city of Entebbe on Friday. Madbouli is set to deliver the Egyptian speech in the summit. The summit also includes a closed session for the heads of states and governments, followed by a general session, then followed by an adoption of a joint statement for the summit. Gaza's Civil Defense Agency reported that the death toll from an Israeli airstrike the day before on a house in Jabalia in the north of the Palestinian territory had risen to 23. In another strike in the area, Israel hit what was previously a police station, and the toll from the attack had risen to 11. Israeli strikes continued, killing at least 5 people, a couple and their 3 children, inside their tent in the Mawasi area of the city of Khan Yunis. Agency spokesman Mahmoud Bassal said that the deceased woman had been pregnant. Since Israel resumed the offensive on March the 18th, at least 1,978 people have been killed in Gaza. The United Nations warned that Gaza was facing deepening hunger 55 days into a total Israeli blockade on all aid entering the Palestinian territory. After 18 months of devastating war and an Israeli blockade on the aid since March the 2nd, the UN has warned of a dire humanitarian situation for the 2.4 million inhabitants of the Palestinian territory. The UNRWA chief decried that most of the affected people were women and children. He added that the wounded, sick, and elderly are deprived of medical supplies and care, calling for lifting the siege and resuming the ceasefire. In the West Bank, Israeli occupation forces continued an offensive in the Tulkarm city and its refugee camp for the 89th day, and another offensive in the Nur Shams camp for the 76th day. The offensives pushed 40,000 people out of their homes, destroyed roads and infrastructure, and demolished hundreds of homes. Since the Israeli war of genocide began in Gaza in 2023, Jewish settlers have also established about 80 new outposts, and the Israeli government has established 13 new settlements. Meanwhile, the new Israeli checkpoints have further divided the territory and made movement between the Palestinian towns and cities more difficult. Lebanese official media reported that 8 people were wounded in a drone attack in a border village, as Syria said it responded to the artillery fire from Lebanon. The report said that the wounded were Syrian refugees in the border village of Haush Sayyid Ali. Meanwhile, a statement from the Syrian Defense Ministry source accused the Lebanese Hezbollah group of launching artillery shells at the Syrian army positions in the Qusayr area of Homs province. The United Nations has urged India and Pakistan to exercise maximum restraint as the nuclear armed rivals ramped up tit-for-tat diplomatic offensive following a deadly attack in the disputed Indian part of Kashmir. The UN appeal comes amid soaring tensions between New Delhi and Islamabad after gunmen killed 26 people in the Indian annexed region on Tuesday. India immediately described the incident as a terrorist attack, blaming Pakistan for backing it and announcing a series of diplomatic actions against Pakistan. U.S. President Donald Trump has said he is open to meeting Iran's supreme leader or president following a meeting last week over Iran's nuclear program. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi is set to leave for Oman for fresh talks with the United States after both sides reported progress in the first 2 rounds that started on April the 12th. Trump's special envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, will represent the United States in the talks scheduled on Saturday. A senior Russian military officer was killed when a car exploded in the town of Balashika, just east of Moscow. A Russian committee said that the officer was the deputy head of the main operations directorate of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces and said it had opened the criminal case into the incident. According to the available data, the explosion occurred as a result of the detonation of a homemade explosive device filled with destructive elements. Several high-ranking Russian military figures have been assassinated since the start of the war in Ukraine, at operations blamed by Moscow on Kiev. And the Russian drone struck an apartment building in a Ukrainian city, killing 3 people and injuring 10 others. Among the civilians killed in the nighttime drone strike in Pavlorad, in Ukraine's Dnipropetrovsk region, were a child and 76-year-old woman. Russian forces fired 103 Shahed and decoy drones at 5 Ukrainian regions overnight, and the authorities in the Sumy and Kharkiv regions reported damage to the civilian infrastructure but no casualties. Minister of Planning, Economic Development and International Cooperation Rania Bashot, who is also the Egyptian governor to the World Bank Group, presented the Egyptian social protection program Takaful wa Karama as she participated in the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank spring meetings in Washington. Minister Al-Mashot also said that the World Bank offered $1.4 billion over the past 10 years to finance the state's development projects, including social protection projects. Al-Mashot earlier said that Egypt has a promising and stable market adding that the government is following up a comprehensive policy to maintain the economic stability and enhance the competitiveness on both the regional and the international levels. China said that it has exempted some U.S. imports from the 125% tariffs and is asking firms to identify the critical goods that they need leave-free in the clearest sign yet of Beijing's concerns about the trade war fallout. The move, which follows the escalatory statements from Washington, signals that the world's two largest economies were prepared to rein in the conflict, which had frozen much of the trade between them, raising fears of a global recession. Beijing's exemptions pushed the US dollar up slightly and lifted equity markets in Hong Kong and Japan. And this brings us to the end of the news bulletin for today. Thank you for watching and goodbye.